Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Ali Haji from American Tungsten, one of the most watched critical mineral stocks in the market. How are you today?
Doing very well, Tracy. How are you?
We were talking about the executive order from Donald Trump that he put out on the 20th and how that might be impacting you because you are an American based company with a critical mineral everybody wants, tungsten. Can you elaborate?
I would say that the writing was on the wall with respect to that executive order coming. Some of the mandates that were put forward by the White House and the Department of War with respect to not allowing Chinese material to be used in the defense complex certainly gave us a head start or a heads up that this was coming down the pipe. And now that it has come down the pipe, it further validates the conversations that we've had with the potential end users, be they, Boeing, GM, GE, Lockheed, Northrop, etc. Not to say that we've spoken with all of them, but I will say that those are the ultimate end users that we've had contact with some of those individuals or those organizations. The complexity with tungsten and Jack Lifton from the CMI put together a very good article a day or so ago with respect to how tungsten comes out of the ground, how it turns into concentrate and APT, and then ultimately the powders or the bars that these end users would require. For those of you that have been following our story, you would be familiar that we have an LOI with all three off-takers in North America. And so we do have a buyer for our product that will ultimately convert it to the APT and the product that is required by the end users that the White House would like to ensure have secured supply in the United States. So we are working with them. I would say that it is highly supportive given our timelines. We are still aiming and on track to be the first producer of concentrate in North America since 2015. And as a result, very pleased to have seen that come over the wire, and I think it'll do a lot to bring or shed light or shed the spotlight on organizations in North America that are close to production.
A very tight share structure, only 63 million shares outstanding, 51 plus million dollars in the bank. You don't need to raise capital. And I believe you commented earlier that you have two times the grade concentrate. Did I get that right? Please correct me.
Yes, so on our tailings, the average grade of tailings being processed globally is 0.07. We're sitting at 0.15. On our main mine, the average grade globally is zero point 0.2. We're sitting on 0.67, so roughly 3x higher than your global average for tungsten grade, 2x on our tailings. We also have the additional kicker of 2 ounce per ton silver and 0.15% moly. That equates to about $100 to $150 in credits that we will earn outside of what we earn from our tungsten, further hedging us against any price movement. But at that high grade and cut and fill stope method mining, your strip ratio and waste are very low. And as a result of that, there won't be much waste in the system relative to a strip ratio that would be an open pit mine.
Of course, your milestones that you've been achieving have been superb since you started. And you've been in place as a CEO for what, just over a year, just around a year now, correct?
That's correct.
And we're racing towards a PEA, which is due later this year.
Mhm. Our resource update comes out in August, and then our PEA will be out before the end of October.
And it's the tailings that you have the offtake agreements for. Did I understand that correctly?
The tailings are close to commercial terms. The main mine are all letters of interest. So they have all received samples of our ore. They've all tested them in their laboratories. They're very happy with what they're seeing. They're just waiting on a sustained production profile that would be highlighted by our PEA before moving to a binding offtake agreement.
Okay, we've got defense, military, you're American based. And I was talking with Terry Lynch on Sunday morning about the impact of AI on tungsten as well. Can you comment on that a little bit further?
Yes, so I'll touch on that, and then I'll touch on something else that I've learned in the last week that I think would be of interest to our listeners. But the tungsten as a metal is the hardest metal on the periodic table. The only thing harder than tungsten today is diamond. And then you've got the fact that it melts at 3,700 degrees Celsius, also adding to its very long list of qualities that are irreplaceable. As a result of its high heat and conductivity, it is used in microchips. So you cannot build the data centers that we're building today, let alone the actual building, because you wouldn't be able to drill without a tungsten drill bit. But the microchips that sit within those data centers would not be operable at these very high temperatures if they did not have tungsten in them. So tungsten is being used tremendously in the AI data centers, but a fun fact that I learned from the International Tungsten Institute as of Monday is, some ask, why is China not exporting tungsten? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is the fact that it, of course, is trying to play chess, not checkers, and wants to control this very critical metal. The second being the fact that its head grades might be declining, and as a result, they are reducing their production. The reality is that they're building small fusion reactors, and they will require 100 ton per annum per reactor to be replaced, not recycled. And as a result of that, they're building a significant stockpile to allow them to have fusion reactors in production and in operation over the next 20 years.
You're heading towards a NASDAQ listing in the new year, and you just recently, it was just May when you moved up to the TSX Venture. Can you comment any further about that particular timeline and how it might impact your shareholders?
Certainly, as a company, we've been as you said yourself, accomplished a number of milestones. Those milestones have not been transformational catalysts. The transformational catalysts are upcoming, and that's the resource as well as the PEA and first concentrate sale later this year. When looking at the NASDAQ, and as we achieve these catalysts, the expectation is that we'll re-rate, and I'm hopefully that some of the banks that are about to cover us and launch coverage here will help bridge that gap in terms of valuation. The NASDAQ, in our view, we're American tungsten. We're about to produce in the United States. We've got to be in the United States, which is a market that's 11 times larger than what we have here in Canada. It also allows for various US investors to be able to acquire and purchase our stock. The TSX is not the best medium for the US market, and given we are an American company with an American asset that's bringing tungsten production to America, we believe the NASDAQ is the right home for American tungsten.
Well, speaking of setting yourself up for a home run, can you comment on your Exim deal that you have and how that will actually work with the timeline you currently have?
Exim is something that was perhaps spoken about by many in the mining industry over the last year or so, primarily prompted by the 2 billion plus that was granted to Perpetua for their stibnite mine. That $2 billion, as you can imagine, has a very long laundry list of items that need to be fulfilled. And I've spoken with the guys over at Perpetua on a number of occasions, very close friends with one of their senior officers. And they have ongoing dialogue with Exim in order for them to release that funding. Our funding is 25 and a half US. As you can imagine, that has a significantly shorter laundry list of items that we have to fulfill before we can have access to that capital. The last item that we need to complete is the PEA. Once that's out in October, we have access to that funding. The funding comes at 0% with repayment starting in year 10. If you recall, or if our followers have been paying attention to the numbers that I've stated historically, 30 million will be needed for our mill, 40 million will be needed for our production drift. That 25 and a half is a significant pad in the treasury at a 0% debt package that ultimately helps achieve that. And of course, you also have the tailings. So the tailings on a 5 million capex are anticipated to generate between 40 and 70 million dollars over the life of mine, which is roughly 2 years for that tailings, thereby de-risking the capital requirement on our main mill without bringing any dilution to our cap stack.
I need to ask you a general question. For those of you out there that are going, tungsten, I really don't know what tungsten is. I personally think that tungsten is and maintains its position in the top three most exciting critical minerals in the critical minerals market. I don't know if you agree, but can you comment on why tungsten may just be the most intriguing critical mineral in the market this fall?
Absolutely. I think, tungsten is one of those metals based on its very succinct list of qualities is something that it cannot be substituted. So molybdenum has been used as a substitute for tungsten when putting drill bits and other things of that nature in place. However, you will have to replace that molybdenum drill bit 5 times more often than you would have to replace anything tungsten driven. So the hardness of tungsten, its qualities in terms of heat resistivity, and its ability to be used in microchips, which of course are driving the future of everything that we do here today. Tungsten is not going anywhere, nor have we found any new deposits of significant scale anywhere around the world, much like we did with lithium, for instance, when we saw lithium start to run up, and then we found out that lithium exists just about everywhere on the planet. But tungsten is a very different beast, and as a result, it will remain, in my view, if not the top three, it will become the number one most critical metal out there.
I think management dealing with expansion and growth, it's very underappreciated how important it is to get the right people in. And from our perception, you're doing a stellar job. We're not hearing about resignations. You seem to be attracting world-class talent. Can you comment on how you're dealing with this process? Because you've got some real growth challenges.
We started very early on. I think for me, the fact that we had a fantastic asset when I joined the company, we had about two people that were on, in and around the ground, one in Boise, one in Salt Lake City, VP Mining and VPX. When I brought on the first capital raise in July, we went down the path of bringing on some rehabilitation contractors, some mining contractors, and some drilling contractors. We currently have 45 people on site, so we've grown quite significantly since, a year ago or so. We've also got about nine on the executive management board and leadership team that are spread out across North America and South America. In fact, Jim Whitaker is in Santiago. We've gone down the path of engaging with WSP, SGS, Newfields, and world-class organizations that are able to act as contractors for us. But as a result of our community engagement in the state of Idaho, we've also had a lot of inbound from our neighboring mines. So the likes of Centerra's Thompson Creek and others. We've had a number of resumes come our way that ultimately allow us to build the organization. We've built a camp on site that now houses nine individuals. We've got a core shed. We've got our three-bedroom home alongside that, our corporate office. So we continue to grow, and we are attracting the right talent using either recruitment agencies or personal relationships that have been established by myself and the rest of my team members.
For those of you interested in finding out more, American Tungsten has a superior website, and you can access it at the following link. Thank you so much, Ollie, for joining us today.
Thank you, Tracy.